Over to MP Chambers to start the discussion. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilmot, thank you for coming to committee. Appreciate that you also came in person on a difficult travel day with the weather out there. So hopefully you're getting used to the Canadian climate. My understanding is there's 13 members of the board, if I include yourself. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But only 4 of those would be independent. So it's not like a majority of the board. You recognize that there's still a little bit of an issue around conflicts of interest and overall governance, right?
So the Interac board governance is it's a best practice board governance structure. We do have 13 members, including myself, 4 independents and 8 shareholder nominee directors, of which 6 are from the designated systemically important banks, the large banks, the DSIBs.
Okay. And how much does any of the large big 5 banks own of Interac?
So the shareholding of Interac as a privately held company is not disclosed, but we have many shareholders over and above the large banks of Canada.
But you can understand where the public or some policymakers might have some questions about a lack of transparency and some bona fide questions around conflicts of interest when we don't know the ownership structure, when the volume-based pricing mechanism was brought into place, the board was chaired by 2 of the largest banks in the country. We know that the volume-based pricing, it's nice to see that you announced today that you're moving sometime in 2025, but with a lack of transparency, it leaves open a lot of questions for people to question, really whose interests are being well served. Is it Interac's or is it the secret ownership structure that we don't know about?
So the Interac e-transfer pricing, the current volume-based pricing, it was reviewed and approved by the independent committee, not by the board. The independent committee is made up of independent directors only, plus myself. And then the recent move to a flat rate price, which has been in the works for about a year now, was reviewed and approved by independent committee. And then as a prominent payment system, a PPS system, we review that with the Bank of Canada. We've recently retained approval from the Bank of Canada for that new pricing schedule, and we're in the process of communicating that to the participants and reviewing our communication strategy on it.
And how soon in 2025 will you move to the new structure?
So we're in the process of informing participants. We have 230 participants. With the recent approval from Bank of Canada, we need to go through an orderly process of informing those participants. And then we'd be happy to share the details of the new pricing schedule after that time.
But it'll be a price reduction, right, for a number of players?
It'll be a flat rate structure for 230
For a number
participants.
of new entrants, it'll be a price reduction, correct?
It'll be a flat rate price structure.
If the volume-based pricing system was in effect for a long time, why change it?
So in 2012, as I said in my opening remarks, we had low adoption of e-transfer. We had 30 million transactions at that time. So one of the common commercial practices is to adopt a volume-based tier pricing in order to get the biggest players to gain mass adoption. I think that was very successful over the last 10 years. Today, I think e-transfer is almost a verb, I think, in Canada today. We're going to e-transfer my kid some money at university. And so now's the right time. And so we spent a year reviewing the global market, looked at other real-time payment systems around the world, and a flat rate structure is the appropriate structure, so that's what we're implementing in 2025.
Which would be better for competition, correct?
A flat rate structure means open access and a level playing field for all participants.
Great. But you were looking at it for a year, and we're a bit delayed. So again, when there's secret ownership structure and a governance model that may or may not be relied upon, the public will look at it and say, well, of course there's delays because the ownership structure might kind of force there to be delays. But in any event, you brought up prominent payment systems. Is Interact in compliance with the current standards as set out by the Bank of Canada? In full compliance with the standards that the Bank of Canada sets out?
So we're regulated by Bank of Canada, as you've said, with the prominent payment system. We are observing or broadly observing all of Bank of Canada's expectations on us, oversight expectations. We can't talk about any of the specifics of that due to the Payment Clearing and Settlement Act.
Right, but for example, just one of the standards is, and I apologize for cutting off, but I'm running short on time, and I like to be fair to my fellow members. One of the standards is that the criteria to become a member of Interact is public. But I can't find that anywhere on Interact's website. So you're not in compliance with the Bank of Canada standards, at least with respect to that standard. Would that be correct?
So Interac e-Transfer is observing or broadly observing all oversight expectations. That the one report the Bank of Canada does produce on an annual basis states that essentially Interac is in good standing as it relates to the oversight of e-Transfer.
I note the addition of broadly observing, but I'll follow up on a future round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Chambers. MP Turnbull, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I echo my colleagues' comments about you being here in person, Mr. Wilmot. It's great to have you here. I note that the Competition Bureau recently announced at our committee that they are looking into potential anti-competitive behavior in the e-transfer industry, and namely at Interac. Were you aware of that?
Yes, absolutely, and we're working with the Competition Bureau, and we actually have a meeting with them later on this week.
So you fully intend to cooperate with that investigation or review?
We welcome the opportunity to talk through all of the e-transfer aspects with the Competition Bureau.
Okay. We've also previously heard testimony at this committee about the challenges associated with accessing e-transfer services and some of the operational restrictions that Interact actually imposes, or at least that's what some of our fintech companies called your practices highly burdensome and anti-competitive. That's what they said, not my words. Should the Competition Bureau approach you to discuss these practices, how will you respond to those concerns?
So Interac is committed to broadening access to e-transfer. Today we have 230 participants, direct participants to the e-transfer system. We've worked with both FINTRAC and the Canadian Investment Regulatory Oversight Authority to enable investment dealers as well as money service bureaus to directly connect. It's really great that one of Canada's fantastic success stories in the fintech space, Wholesale, took that up, and they have directly connected to enable their business and provide differentiation for them. So we welcome broadening access.
So, and is your new announced, I don't know whether you've actually officially announced it, but I see some articles that I've flagged here on a flat fee pricing structure that you're moving forward with. Have you officially announced that?
No, we haven't. So e-transfer will be priced on a flat rate fee in 2025, and we're in process of communicating that to the 230 participants.
And is that in line with what you just said, which is that you're committed to broadening access? How does that broaden access?
I think it helps broaden the access. We're a regulated payment system. Therefore, it's not up to us who can join e-transfer. We do need to ensure that Bank of Canada is supportive of that. But flat rate pricing, which is a common pricing schedule for real-time payment systems around the world, will clearly enable and help open access.
And then you had said that the Bank of Canada actually approved this. Is that correct? And when did they approve it?
So the Bank of Canada recently approved it. We, as with any pricing change for any of the prominent payment systems, we go through a lot of detail with the Bank of Canada to explain why we're making a change, what the benefits are of that, the consequences of doing that, and there's a good length of time in order to ensure that everything's very well understood before the approval is given by the Bank of Canada. But they've recently provided us that approval, which gives us the green light to go ahead and talk to our participants.
So, and that was really recent? Like how recent, within the last couple of weeks, within the last few days? How recent, just so I'm aware?
Yeah, it was, so as I said before, we started this process a year ago.
Yep.
And it was within the last 4 weeks that Bank of Canada provided approval.
Okay, Chair, do I have any more time left? Or?
You do. You have about 2 minutes.
Oh, wow. I'm doing very well. So we've heard about your volume-based pricing model, which was how you've been doing things for quite some time. Help me understand how a flat fee is going to help those smaller players in the space, the fintechs that are trying to disrupt and work within this space. Like, how is it going to help them access this and create a more level playing field, as you said earlier?
So volume-based pricing starts at a higher level. Let's say it starts at 100 to begin with and goes to 50 next and then goes to 10 as a third step. Just take that as an example. And so as you start your volumes, they would be priced at 100. And then when you get past a certain level, it goes to 50. When you get past that level, it goes to 10. And so smaller players would be paying at 100. Or maybe at 50 if they're medium-sized. So with a flat rate pricing, and then that flat rate pricing would have a starting point that is much lower, and say that starting point was 15, as an example. So your first transaction would be 15, your second and last transaction would be 15. However many you go, it will always be 15. So
that will certainly help those smaller players, I would think. But it's still a strategic decision. So I'm assuming you made that decision with your shareholders in mind as well? Like, it must be better for business? Or is it, are you taking a loss on this new fee structure? I wouldn't think so. So is it just better business practice from your perspective? Is it serving your shareholders?
Yeah, to your point, it's a big move for us. And so that's why it took a year to ensure that we really understood all the implications of doing this, and also to ensure that we understood globally what was happening. So it was then reviewed and approved by the independent committee. So the board was never involved. The independent committee gave us the approval. And at that point, we then informed the board of what we're doing. At that point, we then went to Bank of Canada. And pretty much that's where we're sitting now. We're preparing all the fee schedules, communications for 230 participants. And then we're looking at our communication strategy at that point afterwards.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, la parole est à vous.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. You pronounce your name Wilmot? Yes. Can you hear the interpretation? The interpretation is on the English channel. Yes, this is the English channel. That should be the right channel. I'm speaking French to see if you're picking up the English translation. Or interpretation, I should say. Can you hear the interpretation? Yes, you can hear it. You can confirm that you can hear me before I actually start asking my question, so that I don't have to repeat myself. Can you hear me in English? Yes, I can. I'll take a chance then. So the testimony of the Competition Bureau said that there was an agreement Sorry, go ahead. Okay, so during the testimony by the Competition Bureau, we heard that the Bureau had a consent agreement from 1995 to 2020. Can you hear me? No, unfortunately, I can't. We're just going to take a second. The clerk is going to go make sure that it works.
Bravo. On va suspendre juste une
Yeah.
minute.
We're going to suspend for just a minute.
In English, and then turn up your volume, and then see if you can.
Missy,
This is the interpreter on. Hear everything that I'm saying. Perfect. So I think that your microphone is on, and so you can't hear as well if it's on. There you go. So that should be better. So during the testimony by the Competition Bureau, we heard that the Bureau had a consent agreement with Interac from 1996 to 2020. So with regard to things that go against competition in the financial markets, and it was relevant. The agreement was relevant to that, and I'm sure you're aware of it. But why isn't there a similar agreement, not just about the relevant financial markets, but for e-transfers?
And the consent agreement from 1996 to 2020 that was regarding the Interac debit service. Interac e-transfer was not included in that. However, the Competition Bureau was involved in the structuring of Interac's corporation and the governance model around that. And so today we are now talking to the Competition Bureau about their initial assessment into e-transfer.
Mais pourquoi ne pas avoir couvert les virements Interac, justement?
And so why weren't e-transfers covered?
I can't talk to the Competition Bureau's decisions in the mid-90s.
On nous a aussi informé que quand
We
des
were also told that as there are financial institutions other than banks, so financial institutions that are not banks, like the fintech companies. So when they requested access to consumers' accounts, the banks imposed the use of the Interac network. But the banks are also major shareholders of Interac. So I wonder whether you think that it's a fundamental problem with regard to good competition.
Thank you for the question. So fintech companies have a number of different ways that they could move money between the banks. So they could move money through electronic funds transfer. EFT is a very common method around the world for fintechs, through pre-authorized debit, bill payments, and e-transfer. We welcome access to e-transfer. That's why we have 230 participants. We've worked to broaden that access, and Fintech and the Canadian Investment Regulatory Oversight Authority have enabled us to widen that access. We work with Wholesale to make that possible. It's not I would not claim it's an easy process. I mean, you're connecting to a prominent payment system, so there are very high levels of expectation. Not just technology, from a business rule point of view, a regulatory perspective, a security perspective. So it's not a small undertaking to connect to e-transfer.
Vous dites, puis pour faire le lien avec ma question précédente.
So I'd like to link back to my earlier question. You were saying that the Competition Bureau had examined the governance model of Interac, and the Competition Bureau also told us here in committee that there should be more oversight to find out what happens in the board of directors. And we know that at Interac, the Canada's banks are your major shareholders. And of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the information that we have. So should we then conclude that in order to have competition in e-transfers, that there should be more oversight of boards of directors?
So Interac is very committed to working with the Competition Bureau and to answering their questions. We're meeting with them later this week. Their initial assessment will work, closely with them. The governance structure of Interac, there are 13 directors, of which 6 designated systemically important banks, DSIB, so less than half of the directors. And there are certain decisions like pricing, which never go to the board of directors. They stay in the independent committee. The independent committee, I'm a member of it, and there are 4 independent directors. So we have best practice corporate governance in place, and that was put in place in 2018.
Si je comprends bien pour le conseil
If I
d'administration.
understood correctly, yes, for the board of directors, but the shareholders are a majority in the majority banks.
So Interac has a wide range of shareholders, including the designated systemically important banks. But it has a cross-section of payment processors, Caisse Populaire, credit unions, newer entrant fintechs, who are our shareholders as well.
Merci, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Ms. Dance, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm new to the committee, so I'm actually going to take a couple of steps back here just to make sure that I completely understand what I'm asking so I don't get anything confused here. So my riding is Elmwood Transcona, and people are struggling daily to afford groceries, cost of living, and all that stuff. So every dollar really matters. So when I'm looking at, when I've heard what you've said tonight, you talked a little bit about the payer as well as the recipient when it comes to transferring money. So if I'm understanding this correctly, both the payer pays to transfer money and the recipient pays to receive the money. Am I understanding that correctly?
So Interac e-transfer prices the service to the 230 participants.
Okay.
And we do not set any prices for consumers or businesses. So what those 230 participants then charge their customers, we have no insight to. So it is a wholesale business-to-business arrangement for e-transfer.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I'm just trying to figure out how this all works in the big scheme of things. Because earlier tonight you talked about how there's 20 million transactions happen every day, right? So, and if I'm basing it on the fact that you went from 100 to 50 down to 15 cents per transaction, we're looking at about $3 million a day, which I'll be honest with you, I tried to use my calculator to figure out what that would be in a year, and I'm pretty sure that's over $1 billion a year in fees back and forth. So I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. And when I'm hearing that we're talking about how it's not regulated, that we don't know what those numbers are and what you're offering, going from your volume-based tiers now to this flat rate fee, how can Canadians know that we're actually paying a fee that's reasonable and that isn't padding the pockets when you guys reported a 13% profit last year?
So Interac is a privately held company, so we don't disclose our financial results. One of the surveys that we do surveys on our products to ensure we understand how consumers are using them. E-transfer is free to 95% of Canadians. So 5% of Canadians pay for their e-transfers. And that's because those 230 participants, they will bundle the pricing of e-transfer into a number of different products that you and I would use from the financial institution. So only 5% of Canadians actually pay for e-transfers, and I think that is part of the reason for its mass adoption and success in the marketplace.
So when you talk about going to the flat rate fee, that's going to make sure that the major banks, credit unions, Caisse Populaire, all of them are all paying the exact same amount, correct?
That's accurate.
That's accurate. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this completely. So when everybody's paying the same amount and those fees will be lowered, what is that going to look like for, and those numbers are going to continue to go back up, right? Because I would assume every year you're going to look for a little bit of an increase. Will that mean that at some point those smaller businesses are going to be back to paying what they were paying before?
So we're committed to, Interac's committed to the flat rate price schedule for e-transfer. As volume gets bigger, assuming we do our job well, we should be able to gain efficiencies in our system. And so I don't see prices going up for e-transfer. I see efficiencies that would enable prices to stay as they are or even perhaps come down. And as you look at jurisdictions such as Australia or the UK, India, Brazil, you see that scale can really benefit the ecosystem. And that's a question of getting the right technology in place. And in fact, the real-time rail, RTR, will help to modernize the payments infrastructure in Canada. And a modern infrastructure enables efficiencies and use the latest technologies such as public cloud or AI. And that can help to make a system more secure and more efficient, which by definition should mean that we can maintain prices or even lower them at some point in the future.
When you talk about the monopoly in some of these other countries, or when you talk about what the other countries are doing, do they have a monopoly like you do here in Canada, or is there some competition there that might allow them to keep their prices or their fees lower?
Yeah, so around the world, about 50 countries have put in real-time payment settlement system, a new one that's for low-value payments. And there are other payment rails also available to all of these participants. They could be a batch system, a high-value payment system, as well as this low-value settlement system. And what you see fintechs do is that they'll have different products on different rails with different prices. And so consumers and businesses will then access these different sort of sophisticated products. And so it's really bringing in another opportunity for building payment products on top of e-transfer and the real-time rail.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Rempel-Garner. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you are going to a flat rate, but you weren't clear with my colleague on whether or not any of your members would see a reduction in fees. Will any of your members or users see a reduction in fees when you go to the flat rate? Mr. Wilmot.
Thank you for the question. The flat rate will be introduced in 2025. We have just received approval from Bank of Canada. We are in the process of communicating that to the 230 participants. We don't disclose the rates as a privately held company for those 230 participants. And when we have discussed that with the participants, and then we'll also move towards what our communication strategy will be for that flat rate scheme.
So just to be clear, though, are you posturing, are you saying that every single one of your users will pay the same rate?
So the flat rate fee will replace the volume-based fee. And each of the 230 participants will receive a new fee schedule accordingly.
Okay, so a fee schedule. So it sounds to me when you say that like you're obfuscating a bit. Will there be hidden fees? Will anyone see a reduction in fees? Or is this just kind of a shell game to placate a potential Competition Bureau investigation?
The pricing review of e-transfer has been in place for over a year. It was one of the first things that I initiated when I took over as CEO. It's been a highly complex exercise. We want to make sure it's fit for purpose for the next 10 years, as the current schedule has been for the last 10 years. And we really need to ensure that we had the Bank of Canada fully on board with what we're doing as well.
Would it be fair to say that none of your 230 participants will see a reduction in fees?
The flat rate schedule is it's a different fee schedule for all 230, and they will receive those schedules. Does that
mean that there'll be like hidden fees or different access fees? associated. So you just said that you went to a flat rate, but now there's going to be different structures for 230 different participants. How does that work?
The current volume-based pricing that I was explaining earlier that goes through the tiers, top tier, middle tier, lower tier, that means that each of the 230 participants have a different economic model for using e-transfer. With the flat rate pricing, everybody will have the same economic model.
So will anyone see a reduction in pricing?
The flat rate pricing, we need to communicate it to the participants, the 230 participants. And after that, we'll then look at our communication
and the reason
strategy.
why I ask is our committee is being tasked with coming up with recommendations on a wide variety of areas, including the lack of competitiveness in this area. So if you're signaling to this committee that there is no reduction in pricing, I would just challenge your assertion that somehow this curiously timed move to a flat rate system would somehow enhance access for other players into the system. Prove me wrong.
The 2025 fee schedule for e-transfer has been worked on for over a year. It was one of the first things that I initiated at the end of 2023.
How will it make things more competitive? So what I'm taking away from this is that nobody is going to see a fee reduction. There's no significant changes in your governance. So that leaves us to look at recommendations of perhaps some different types of intervention to spur competition in the area. Has the government approached you suggesting that they may be looking at intervening by asking you to open your network for interoperability for other e-transfer programs? Has the government approached you with that recommendation yet?
We're working with Payments Canada closely on the real-time rail. The Retail Payments Activities Act is going to open up the real-time rail to many payment service providers. E-transfer is going to be settled on the real-time rail.
What has the government communicated to you in terms of timing for implementation?
I believe the Bank of Canada has stated that the target is to have testing to start towards the end of 2026 for real-time rail.
Okay, and in terms of other recommendations, has the government approached you suggesting that they would be open to enabling blockchain-based payment systems or other decentralized payment networks as competitive alternatives to Interac? Have they said, get ready for this, guys?
We have not had any conversations about a blockchain-enabled payment system with the government.
Okay. And just to be clear, with the opportunity you have in front of committee members here who are looking at recommendations to the government or future governments on how to deal with the lack of competition in this particular sector, will any of your participants actually experience lower rates as a result of the move to your different fee cycle or structure? My apologies.
So one of the statements I made earlier, I think, was that 6% of electronic transfers are on e-transfer. So 94% are on other methods, electronic funds, EFT, electronic funds transfer, pre-authorized debit, bill payment. There are other competitors in the market, PayPal, Apple. And so there are a number of different ways to move money or accept payments, whether it's person-to-person or a small, medium business accepting payment.
How is the independent committee of Interac compensated? What is their compensation structure?
So the independent directors are compensated. The compensation is set by the governance committee. The board does not set any of that compensation, and we don't disclose the compensation for executive officers like myself or for directors.
So we would have no way of knowing how they would be motivated to make decisions on a pricing schedule as parliamentarians then. Would that be a correct assessment?
We don't disclose compensation for executive officers or for directors of Interac.
I'm not looking for amounts. I'm just looking at the decision-making structure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, MP Rempel-Garner. I'll now turn it over to MP Gahir.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Wilmot for appearing. So I was actually a little bit confused as well as the NDP member about the structure, but her questions actually clarified it. Mr. Wilmot, you mentioned that you charge banks or the participants a fee based on an arrangement that's going to change, and what the participants charge to their customers is up to them. You said that 95% of customers pay for their do not pay for their e-transfer. Only 5% of customers do, and it's because, as you said, they bundle the e-transfer prices into other services they offer. So in effect, the customers are paying for e-transfers, maybe not directly, but because of the checking account that they've signed up for, they might be paying as a bundled service for e-transfer, correct?
So Interac prices e-transfer on a wholesale basis. It's what I would call a B2B2C, a business to business to consumer. So we're the business to business part of that. We will set in 2025 a flat rate. And then participants, the 230 participants, they'll take that rate and they'll make their own commercial decisions on whether, and those commercial decisions will be highly complex, I'm sure, but they make those decisions. We don't have insight into that.
Have you done any analysis? And I guess this question is going to be very similar to what Mr. Rempel-Gardner had asked, but do you have any assurances from the businesses that you charge for your service that the end user will see a reduction in fees? Have you done any work on that analysis, meetings with your participants?
No. Interact's been focused on the wholesale rate, the B2B rate, and ensuring that it will support the continued growth. We've had a 40 times growth over the last 10 years. We would love to see a 40 times growth over the next 10 years. And so we'd have to set a price that the participants can work with and that works for them. And so we all expect digital services at a better price and more convenient and faster all the time, and Interac is no different from any other fintech, that we are striving to meet that expectation of the market.
Because my worry is that it'll end up being like credit card rewards, where the wealthy that spend their credit cards a little bit more will get more rewards, and it's the people that don't spend as much that will have to pay for it, that are usually lower in the socioeconomic rung. It's the same thing with Interact in a way as well, no? Just to finish that thought, because I have friends that work at banks, they're all bank managers, and the credit cards, the checking accounts, the saving accounts that are offered, the ones that are more high end, the ones that have a higher fee or ask you to hold more money in the bank account, that's where Interac is free. But it's some of those lower accounts where there's the beginner accounts, starter accounts, the ones where you don't have to hold a certain amount of money in your account, maybe because you don't have that money. Those are usually the accounts that will charge you for the Interac service.
So Interac focuses in on the wholesale B2B rate. And we try and ensure that it's going to be, not try and ensure, we will ensure it is a flat rate in 2025. And we will ensure that we look to continue to support the notion that 95% of Canadians don't pay for e-transfer, so that it gets widely used, and it's an easy way to accept money as a small, medium business, and it's also an easy way to transfer money person to person.
So I agree with all that. I just don't want the bottom 5% to have to then subsidize the top 95%. Is sort of my worry. And obviously, Interac is adopted by a lot of users in Canada. You have a lot of participants. You have all the big banks. You were founded by the banks, and I think there's heft there. So if you throw that heft around, I think there can be arrangement where the final end user sees a reduction in fees.
Is going to make all of that possible by having a flat rate fee for e-transfers, and then the 230 participants can make their own decisions commercially in terms of how to improve customer service and improve the customer value proposition.
Sure. How much time do I have left?
You're about done, Mr. Gaillard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Merci. Tout d'abord,
Thank you. I'm curious about something, Mr. Wilmot. Earlier, you were saying that there were concerns with regard to security on the part of fintechs. Did I understand you correctly?
What I stated is that connecting to e-transfer is not an easy task. It requires security, regulatory, operational, as well as technological effort. And so it's an undertaking that needs to be well thought through for people who do want to directly connect to e-transfer.
Mais est-ce que y voyez-vous un frein, par exemple?
But do you see that as something that will slow business down to have to go through that technology if there are concerns about security?
I think that fintechs have a variety of different options that they could deploy. So, as I said, around the world, you see a lot of fintechs use the EFT or electronic funds transfer rail, and they provide product sets on that enable direct connect to bank accounts. And e-transfer is a prominent payment system. We take that responsibility very seriously. We want to meet the expectations, oversight expectations of the Bank of Canada. And so we want to be very careful to ensure the integrity of the system. A payment network is only as good as the trust that is in it. If people trust e-transfer, and I think they do, Canadians do, they use it as a verb, I'll e-transfer you. The trust really exists, but if payments got lost or payments were scammed or there was fraud, there would be a rapid deterioration in trust and people would stop using e-transfer. And so we really need to ensure that any participant who is directly connected to e-transfer has all of the necessary skills, capabilities, and meets the expectation that a prominent payment system deserves.
Mais comme vous le savez, quand on développe des nouvelles
As you
technologies,
know, when new financial technology is developed and proposed to consumers, it's important to know whether the consumer will actually accept the price. And to know that, you have to look at the prices that are already in effect and then compete. That's what price competition is. But when you change your fees, and you said that you're making a decision about that, but when the change in Interac fees is not public. So that means that, in fact, your fee system is quite opaque. So how can we foster healthy competition when potential competitors cannot know how a quasi-monopoly sets its prices?
So the e-transfer flat rate fee to be introduced in 2025 will encourage new entrants onto the e-transfer platform due to a lower entry cost for e-transfer. There are a number of different methods that fintechs can access in order to enable their service. And I think that the possibilities and the opportunities for fintechs are there for them, and they have the ability to really focus in on what the value proposition is for consumers and for businesses in order to adopt that technology. The second thing I'd say is that we have 230 participants. There are about 100 million transactions a month being processed on e-transfer. Clearly, the 230 participants see that as a valuable way to move money. We don't want to lose that. We want to ensure that all 230 participants still believe this is a good way to support their value propositions to customers. They don't switch it to another rail, which they absolutely can. And so we will be competitively priced to ensure that that happens, and that flat rate fee will enable the 230 participants, I hope, to stay with the system and for us to broaden access to increase the number of direct participants.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. And before I turn it over to MP Dance, just you said they can move to another rail. They absolutely can do that. What are the other rails in Canada, and how many participants do they have? Or am I
If you look at payment methods, there's paper payment methods, card payment methods, and electronic payment methods. The card is typically credit and debit. The electronic is electronic funds transfer, EFT, that would happen typically on the ACSS, the automated clearing system or batch system. And that EFT platform is used by fintechs in order to enable money to move from A to B. It's also possible to work with larger technology companies, data providers such as Plaid or Flinks, to work with PayPal in order to provide different propositions. So there are a number of different ways that fintechs could actually move money for their customers.
Okay. But for e-transfers, basically, the other ways imply like credit cards, like you've mentioned, for instance, or PayPal or other companies. But for e-transfers, who would be, you would say, your biggest competitor in Canada?
So for e-transfers, it will be EFT, debit cards. It's ways of accepting money or moving money directly between bank accounts.
Okay. Okay, so basically the service you're providing is just you're relaying the information between the banks, so between the participants. You're saying in your ledger change that, in your ledger change that, and you're making the connection between the two, if I'm simplifying.
I think so. So account-based payments, account to an account, a source of good funds on one end, a destination of good funds on another end, and in order to ensure that it's a direct account-to-account payment. And that's what we're talking about. So a debit card, debit rail, a EFT rail, e-transfer as a product, they enable this account-to-account. And when RTR, real-time rail, comes, that will be another capability that fintechs will be able to use in order to move directly from one account to another account.
Can I just confirm how much time I get?
Get about 2:30.
2:30? Okay, sorry. So I just, again, I feel like I'm always trying to clarify things for myself. So I just want to just check, do you recommend a fee that your 230 businesses charge individuals, or is there any type of, suggested price that the bank, Caisse Populaire, credit union would charge the consumer?
Interac is not involved at all on recommending an end user price.
Okay. And so with that being said, they can charge Canadians whatever they want.
Interac is focused on the business-to-business wholesale pricing. The 230 participants who provide financial services to consumers and small business, 230, that's a lot of companies competing in a market of 40 million people, 30 million economically active people. There's a lot of competition in order to ensure, consumers and businesses can choose whether they want to take those financial services from a highly localized, smaller financial institution like a credit union that plays a very important role in Canadian society, or they want to take it from a national provider like one of the designated systemically important banks, the DSIBs, in Canada.
So even if you were to say I belong to a credit union and currently I'm paying $1, but they're only paying, say, 20 cents for each electronic fund transfer that I send, even if you lower it for them to, say, 15 cents or 10 cents, whatever that number is, that might not mean that it's going to make any difference for myself or Canadians in general, right? Because they're going to continue to charge whatever they want.
I think the e-transfer flat rate fee will benefit the smallest players, so the smallest credit unions.
Right.
And I think in the credit union...
Not necessarily Canadians, sorry.
Yes, no, absolutely Canadians. So consumers and small businesses who are served by the credit unions, and the credit unions are served by aggregation companies like Essential One, as an example, that help to make e-transfer easier to consume and easier to operate. They play a fundamentally very important role because some of these credit unions are small. They offer, one town can rely heavily on a credit union, and so the centrals play a very important role in that.
Sorry, I'm conscious of my time. I just want to ask. So when you put your flat rate fee program in place in 2025, will that number, whatever that number is, will Canadians know what that number is? Like, will that be public knowledge?
So we are working through what our communication strategy is for the new flat rate pricing. So we are first informing the participants. After that, we will execute on the communication strategy that we're currently reviewing. And once we review that, and then we'll execute on that. But there are many markets around the world that do publish their real-time settlement fee schedules. Yeah. So if Canada did that, it would be following global best practice. But we have just received Bank of Canada approval for a flat rate schedule. We haven't yet communicated to the participants. So the right order to ensure stability of the system and there are no surprises for anybody is that we follow these steps. So I'm not saying we're not going to do that, but we're reviewing that. And I do understand global best practice is that you do transparently publish it on your website. I understand that. So we are discussing that, and then we'll execute on that in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Dan. So I will now turn to the Conservative. I don't know, it's not clear. Mr. Généreux, okay. And colleagues, just so you know, we'll end the meeting at 7:30 as was originally planned. So you understand we've got about 20 minutes left of questions. So, Monsieur Généreux.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. I think your accent indicates that you're from England. Is that right?
Oui, c'est bien ça.
So how do things work as far as competition goes in England? I mean, is there far more competition in Europe than in Canada?
The UK and Europe, two different things, and but both have pursued what I'd call open banking or consumer-driven banking, as we're talking about here. Through payment service directives. So they're actually on the third generation of a payment service directive, PSD3.
Which is not the case in Canada.
I'm sorry?
Which is not the case in Canada.
That's right. The consumer-driven banking framework that we're working through right now that comes together with RTR as well as RPAA, I think provides a 2 or 3 year path for us where we're really at a point that we can accelerate open access, we can accelerate innovation, and now it's about executing on the 2 or 3 year roadmap that's been put in place.
Dans votre discours d'ouverture, vous avez mentionné.
In your opening statement, you said that you were very innovative and a precursor in the field, but am I right that you're actually behind all of the new developments with open banking and cyber currencies, etc.? Because you have some catching up to do, don't you?
Interac has innovated ahead of the world in many areas. I think the latest area is around business request to pay on account to account, around verification and authentication capabilities, around AI-enabled fraud detection to avoid scams. And there's a long history, such as with the digital wallets that I talked about, as well as with chip and PIN. So we have a strong innovation department. Our strategy is about bringing innovative new use cases on our existing platforms today. So Interac has a strong innovation history that we plan to continue going forward.
La Banque du Canada vient de vous autoriser. Vous avez dit, vous avez pas eu...
The Bank of Canada just authorized you, and you haven't had time to share it with your participants, or your participants or your clients, I imagine. So you haven't had a chance to transfer the information that the Bank of Canada has authorized you to go toward the flat rate. But what we heard from prior testimony is that it can go from 6 to 46 cents per transaction. But earlier you said that a flat rate, ABC, low, middle, and high, I imagine that's what the flat rates are, the tiers. My question is that the clients in each of those volume tiers, will there be a real difference among your participants? So the flat rate within the 3 tiers that you mentioned, that flat rate will be different, I imagine. Is that true?
The flat rate for e-transfer will be flat, regardless of whether there is one transaction or 100 million transactions. It will be the same price. There is only one price, and it will be flat.
OK. Est-ce que c'est possible de déposer au comité?
All right. Would it be possible to submit to the committee the structure for your fee rates according to the flat rate after you provide it to your members, of course?
Yes, we would be happy to do that.
J'ai encore du temps, Monsieur le Président?
Do I still have time, Mr. Chair? About 30 seconds, Mr. Généreux. What percentage do you have of the market that you operate in? So in the Interact e-transfer debit market, what is your percentage of the market?
According to the Payments Canada 2023 report, Interac e-transfer has a 6% market share of electronic payments in Canada.
I don't get that, but anyway.
Merci, Monsieur Généreux.
Thank you, Mr. Généreux. Mr. Aria?
Ms. Wilmot, you use the words strong innovation history, and you also use the words innovated ahead of the world. How do you compare yourself with UPI?
Well, I think UPI is the world's best real-time payment system.
How old is UPI?
UPI is 10 years old.
And how old is Interac?
Interac e-transfer is 21 years old.
So, 21 years, you said that we are the first in the world in so many systems, we are the first in the world in innovation, we are the greatest, etc. How come a global south country, where literacy rate is still low, and we are a G7 country, the most developed country, why is that we have to learn from them?
Canadians could send money from one person to another with an email address in 2003. India or Malaysia or Australia or UK or Brazil could not do that. We were the first country in the world to do that.
Let's talk about email transfer. Suppose I want to transfer $15,000 from my CIBC account on the street to my Scotiabank account on the same street. How many days it will take?
I don't know.
There you go. That's the banking system. But you're almost saying that, with e-transfer, you can always do instantaneously. We did. Email system is outdated. And a lot of, you talked about the ETF, etc. A lot of ETF is limited to the banking hours, correct? EFTs.
No, I don't believe so.
So the direct deposit, pre-authorized rebates can happen anytime?
I believe so. They're 24/7.
Okay, so what you're saying is that these things can take any time. Why is that? A lot of things, for example, let's talk about the pay direct. I don't know whether your infrastructure provides help for the direct deposit system. Does it?
E-transfer has real-time availability of funds as a result of using the high-value payment system at Payments Canada called Links. And it means that when you send money to your son or daughter at university, they get it seconds later. When a small or medium business accepts money, they get it seconds later as well.
But it is a limited amount. Anyway, coming back, November 1st, you had an outage, or whatever you call the technical glitch. Was it due to any cyber attack?
So the e-transfer degradation of service, which was not an outage, was where e-transfers were taking longer than a lot of people expected. And because it was rent day, it had a particular painful experience for a lot of customers. It was not to do with a cyber attack.
Okay. A colleague of mine asked about the blockchain technologies. Do you think that blockchain technologies are going to disrupt your system?
I think emerging technologies are always something that we need to consider, whether it's the public cloud, AI, blockchain, or whatever is the next emerging technology after that. There is no doubt in my mind, personally, that blockchain is going to play an important role in the movement of money in the future.
Okay. We had a witness in the last time the committee. He was the chief operating officer of a software company. He said, let me quote, Interac offerings are not progressing at a comparable rate to other notable payment providers around the world. Comparing Interac with providers from the United Kingdom, Sweden, India, Brazil, for example, we would find that in under 3 years, these countries rolled out cheaper, faster, more modern, and feature-packed alternatives to their existing payment networks without significant disturbance. What are your comments on this?
E-transfer is a household name and a verb in Canada. It is used by everybody in Canada to send to their loved ones, for small, medium businesses to accept money. And that is a sign of a payment system that is adopted by many, used by many, trusted by many. Now, the PIX network in Brazil, the UPI network in India, the Swish platform in Sweden, they're all fantastic platforms as well. But e-transfer is more widely used than those systems.
That, you keep repeating e-transfer is more widely used by most Canadians because we don't have any we don't have any alternative. People, we have to use, for example, if I have to use phone, either I have to use Rogers, Bell, or TELUS because we don't have any alternative. So you keep saying that most Canadians use this because we lack alternatives, right?
E-transfer represents 6% of electronic transfers. Debit rails are used to move money. EFT rails are used to move money as well as e-transfer. It's only 6% of total electronic transactions. There are alternatives in the marketplace.
And, because of you keep saying that you are a private company, so you can't disclose the ownership structure or the profitability or anything, but you are a unique player in Canadian market, right?
We're a unique player that provides e-transfer, debit, and verification services. And when you put all three of those together, absolutely we're a unique player.
Bulk of the ownership is with the major Canadian banks?
So Interac shareholding is across many different financial institutions and ecosystem players.
I'm talking about who are the, let's put it that way. The number of shareholders, big shareholders are limited, correct?
We have large shareholders, we have small shareholders.
Yeah, exactly. The large shareholders probably control bulk of the shareholding voting rights, correct?
So we have large shareholders, small shareholders. As a privately held company, we don't disclose the shareholdings.
This is the problem we have. The way it has been structured is that we can't question the ownership, we can't question your profitability, we can't question your revenue sources and the cost structure because you always can claim private. But that's how the system is. Anyway, thanks, Chair. I know I've over my time.
But it was interesting, Mr. Arias, so I've allowed you to pursue. But I'll just ask one follow-up question. You keep mentioning, Mr. Wilmot, 6%. So of all electronic payments are made through the Interac e-transfer system. But you include credit card payments, right?
Credit card payments are inside of that.
So, but you keep using the example of sending money to your son or daughter in university. How can I use my MasterCard to send them money if they need? The only option I have is really Interac e-transfer, isn't it?
So if
you exclude credit card payments, what's the percentage that you guys have of all transactions?
So there are 18.5 billion transactions, including credit cards. If I understand correctly, I think credit cards are approximately 6 billion transactions. So 1.2 billion transactions of 12 billion transactions, approximately 10%. And debit cards and EFT are clear channels to move money between businesses and between people as well.
Okay, but for direct deposit and so, but and you don't you need to be within the same institution usually? If I want to send money to someone who's using a different banking institution, I'm with Desjardins, you're with BMO. What's the options that I have? What are the options I have?
Debit rails as well as EFT rails and e-transfer are all possible for fintechs to provide services to businesses and people to move from one account to another account at a different financial institution.
Okay, but I think it's pertinent to remove the credit card payments in the examples when you were talking about sending money between Canadians, transferring money.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. And all the numbers that I quote are the Payments Canada 2023 report. So that's the source that I'm using.
We'll have a look at it, and I'll yield the floor to Mr. Chambers. But all that I'm hearing makes me all the more hopeful that at some point we're going to get new technologies like blockchain that will allow for peer-to-peer, permissionless way to move value around and move money around. And I think it's coming because the legacy financial system has failed Canadians in many ways. Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's exactly what some of the concerns that we have, and you're pointing your finger on it. There isn't really an alternative in the system. So in many ways, Visa is being brought in front of the Department of Justice, or Department of Justice filed a complaint against Visa. Visa controls 60% of the debit market in the U.S. Mr. Wilmot, how much of the debit market does Interac control in Canada?
Interac's debit at the point of sale.
All debit transactions in Canada, what percentage are controlled by Interac?
So Interac's debit at the point of sale, the majority of debit transactions at the point of sale are through Interac.
Not majority, percent. It's like 100%, correct?
I don't have the percentage.
Okay. So here's the kind of broad strokes. This is kind of what I'm hearing. We have a secret ownership group. We have a secret fee schedule. We have legitimate questions about competition in the sector. And now the same ownership group is responsible, who got a sole source contract, to deliver real-time rail, which is directly going to attack the profit pool of that ownership group. So you can understand how, with this kind of cloud of secrecy, how policymakers are questioning, help me understand why we don't make a very radical recommendation, which would be to say, maybe Interac should be its own company. Maybe the financial institution should not be able to own the company. Help me understand why we shouldn't make that recommendation.
Interac worked hard and long for the new corporate structure that we have that was put in place in 2018. That corporate structure does follow governance best practice, has a number of committees that the board is not involved in, whether it's compensation or pricing or other matters, including my own compensation with the HRCC, the HR and Compensation Committee. So we have best in practice governance capabilities. And with RTR, the real-time rail that Interac is involved with Payments Canada, we delivered the first portion of that RTR
just
project.
On RTR, we're behind schedule, are we not?
I think the original schedule that Payments Canada worked to, we're behind that schedule.
Right. So we're behind schedule in delivering a significant economic benefit to users, right? Like, I understand in your previous role that you've identified that this is a significant economic benefit to get to real-time rail, correct?
Absolutely.
Like
Real-time settlement systems are an economic flywheel for
Yeah, my
economies.
understanding is that 2.7% of GDP could be increased if we move to real-time rail. Am I about correct on that?
I don't know where that calculation comes from, but there's economic benefit for
Okay.
real-time settlement systems.
So we're delayed in delivering on real-time rail, which will provide significant benefits to the economy by lowering the profit pool, the transaction profit pool of the owners of Interact, the economic owners of Interact. But as I mentioned before, it's secret, a secret fee schedule, and we're behind schedule on delivering something that will make the banks, your owners, less money. If I could leave you with one recommendation, it would be help us with transparency so that we don't make unwise or very radical regulatory recommendations, because in the absence of any information, we're left with what looks to be, an ownership structure who is working really hard to protect its profit pool. And the issue is not with Interact. The issue is with your secret ownership structure and the banks that we have no idea how they influence decision-making at Interact. So I think I'm really bumping up against my time, but I appreciate you coming here today, and if I could leave one thing with you, it would be please more transparency, because I think otherwise we're left just to wonder how these decisions are being made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Chambers, and I'll echo the sentiment of MP Chambers. And if you, Mr. Wilmot, have anything you'd like to submit in writing as we go forward, please feel free to do so. We're more than open to receiving your submission. Colleagues, we're nearing, and I know you have a flight to catch, so at 9. So I've said we would stop at 7:30. If anyone has a pressing question they'd like to ask, otherwise I will adjourn the meeting. Mr. Van Bynen.
Chair, I'm not disputing the organizational structure. I am concerned about the market dominance, and I think that's the issue that is a concern within this committee. And the one quick solution would be to require divestiture by the major players so that that's an independent corporation. So how much would you attribute the asset base of the current organization with its legacy software and hardware, and because you are the infrastructure, you are the ecosystem for these types of payments. So how much do we have in terms of legacy costs that have been recovered or that are to be recovered? And how would you address that market dominance? Go to the market dominance question first.
So as we've discussed in committee, there are other alternatives to e-transfer. And if we exclude credit cards from electronic payments, I believe e-transfer is about 10%. When we look at debit, electronic funds transfer, EFT, and e-transfer. So there are alternatives, and the 230 participants see real value in e-transfer, and so use e-transfer. To your other question of legacy technology, e-transfer was introduced in 2003, 21 years ago. And with older systems, there is what we would call technical debt. Technical debt due to older infrastructure. One of the great opportunities for all of us with the real-time rail is to move to new technology infrastructure for e-transfer as well. And so to be able to leverage new, in consultation with the Bank of Canada, new technologies like the public cloud, like AI, in order to increase efficiency and make e-transfer an even more valuable platform for Canadians to use for the next 21 years.
I am a bit concerned that it's easy to say exclude credit cards, but I would say that credit cards are just as much a payment system as any other system. And so that doesn't take away my concern about market dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. Just one quick last question. You said we represent about 10% of all payments, excluding credit card payments. And does that include payments like I'm with Desjardins. I send money from one account to another account within my larger Desjardins account. Is that included in there or not?
Yeah, yes, it's included in there. There are fintech companies who
so
can.
the pie keeps shrinking because I mean to me that's not a payment when I'm sending money from my checking account to my savings accounts to my within the same institution. If that's included in the number of payments you're taking into account to first say 6%, now say 10%. I mean that's misleading by a landslide, Mr. Wilmot, I have got to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question.
Okay.
It does not include an inter-financial institution transfer.
An intra-financial
Right,
institution.
because that will be on the financial institution's internal system.
Okay.
So it does not include that, and the Payments Canada report, I think, is quite clear on that.
Okay, we'll have a look at it. I'm reassured, because if it does include that, I'm like,
No.
okay. Ça va prendre, mais très brièvement.
Oui, ça va être en fait juste un nom parce que la question.
Very quickly. Yes, I just need a name. Who is the main competitor of Interac? I know that the question was asked, but I don't think I heard a name. So I just want a name. That's what I'm asking for.
Hopefully.
There are many different types of competitors to Interac. I think I heard someone just say Visa, but Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Apple, Western Union, MoneyGram, and there are also local companies, Flinks would be able to
and maybe one day
compete as
Bitcoin.
well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilmot.
Thank you very much.
Have a great night. Thanks for joining us. Meeting is adjourned.